Your backup plan tribe to another great series of Talking Taboo with Tina. I am your host here today, Tina Ginn. I am with Your Backup Plan app. I'm a creator and developer of Your Backup Plan. And I'm a best-selling author of In the Blink of an Eye. Just like that, your life can change in a quick second. Life-changing. I can't even imagine that quickly, and your life can change. It's incredible, actually. I'm also a financial advisor and an emergency preparedness coach. And we are on all podcast platforms: YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and LinkedIn and Pinterest. So welcome to our show today. Just like we talk about real life stories each and every week with really amazing people, like our special guests today, Robert and Katrina Wiley, from founders of DPP Defense, and our How to Stay Safe in Any Situation. I really liked that show title because I feel that with your backup plan, it kind of works in scenario with it. Not only should you have your crap together in one place of everything that's up in your head and in paper form and in your filing cabinet and all that kind of stuff, but you should also be aware in your surrounding. And so it's going to bring a little bit different kind of light to what we're talking about normally. And I'm really excited to have both of them on with all of their great information. In the blink of an eye, something quickly happens and it's life-changing normally for both you and your family and your loved ones. And that's why we're here today, to try to eliminate just a little tiny smidgen of life-changing for you. Because when something changes in a shock like that, like what we're going to talk with Robert and Katrina about, whether it's a unexpected situation with employee being at work, or whether you're walking down the street and you have a predator watching you, but you're not paying any attention, or if it's a wildfire and you need to get out of your house quickly and taking a few things only of what you can possibly take, and how to evacuate properly with an exit plan. And we talk about all of these kinds of things of planning and preparation. And so I'm really, really excited to bring on Robert and Katrina after this quick commercial break. I'll see you in a quick second.
I strolled without a care, cause I'm going down the road to a brand new place, and I'll get there with a smile on my face. Yeah, so lift me up, I'm moving on, singing and dancing while I play my song.
I did it. I'm sure I'm the only one that gets excited when all of this works properly. And we're going to bring on Robert and Katrina Wiley, coming to us from beautiful Idaho. And they are the founders of DPP Defense. I'm not sure. Are you both the authors of your book?
No, I'm the author of the book that I'm working on.
Okay. They have a book in process right now called Defense Against Frogs, Dogs, and Humans. I love the title. And it will be on their website, and all of their information is also down below. But also, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel if you already haven't, if you're new here, because then you get notified when we have these great guests on our show. I wanted to talk to Robert and Katrina about basically teaching threat detection and mitigation, how to stay safe in any situation. Um, and they have developed their skills. I can hardly wait to hear both of their stories because they've come from a bit different angles, but coming into one to develop this system. You work on security threats or risks to a system and a network, cyber attacks, self-defense, situational awareness, fighting your way out of a situation, preparedness and planning, employers to increase the safety of their employees, and learning how to identify and avoid dangerous situations. That has to be my favorite because I see so many people walking down the street or jogging and they're totally unaware of even the curb or the sidewalk, or they have their head in their phone or listening to their music and they don't even know somebody can come up behind them. So I'm sure you're going to talk about that. So Robert and Katrina, I'm so happy to have you both here today, and welcome to our show. Where did all of this start for you guys?
You want to start?
For me, my expertise is more in the emergency preparedness, similar to you. I grew up in a small town in Utah, in the middle of nowhere, and my dad was an EMT. And in fact, 40 years ago, we were involved with a major flood that did some major damage in our area. And so my parents have always been very emergency preparedness minded. And so I grew up within that type of an idea, that mindset. And then I went to college. And actually, just before that, I worked for the Forest Service doing fought fires for a summer. Then I went and got my degree in recreation education. So I've spent a lot of time in the outdoors and dealing with the elements. And then a few years after Rob and I got married, I joined our local sheriff's office search and rescue, and I've been doing it for almost 20 years. And so that has just expanded to that. I currently work for a university here in Idaho, and I'm a safety coordinator for our building. And I have put together emergency plans for our office specifically, and have done some training on campus as well for other employees and helping their offices set up those plans as well.
That's nice. Thank you, Katrina.
Yeah, we work as a team on quite a few things. In fact, we try to work as a team as often as possible, which works really good for our classes and being able to work with those that are a little more apprehensive about working with just a guy. My history is I, at a very young age, started collecting knives. And once my collection started to grow, I realized I better know how to use these things if I'm going to own them. So I started training and learning about knife play and moved from that to pressure points, martial arts, and firearms, and basically all things self-defense. And then we, for the last 20 years or so, we've been volunteering with the local search and rescue. We try to share our knowledge and help others to increase their safety and, I guess, the quality of life.
Yes, absolutely, because you never know what will happen. We had an instance at our Starbucks in downtown Vancouver where a family had gone into the coffee shop, and he came out with his little girl, and the mom was still inside picking up the drinks. And he came out onto the sidewalk in front of Starbucks, and this guy came along and started stabbing him, and he died. Can you imagine the poor little girl standing there, nobody knowing what to do? That's kind of like that situation. It's happening around the world now. It's not just in the United States.
No.
It's here too. Shootings in schools and on the street and at businesses. And I mean, I think the planning and preparation needs to be more than ever before now.
Yeah, I think the big thing is people need to recognize that it is happening, and they need to acknowledge that. We have a saying that we use in a lot of our classes is denial will hurt you faster than any attacker. You've got to recognize that there is evil in the world, and you have to be aware of that. I mean, we had a shooting here in one of the little towns near us a couple of years ago in the school. It was a 5th or 6th grader brought a gun to school and ended up shooting a custodian and a couple of students. Nobody died, but the first thing we kept hearing is, "Oh, I can't believe that happened here. I'm not in our little town."
Yeah.
And people they just aren't recognizing that it's out there.
Yes. In any town, big or small.
And just because laws exist doesn't mean it will stop what happens. We were at a show not long ago and we had a gal from Australia and she says, "Well, I don't need to worry about that because guns are banned in Australia." And I says, "Well, what about all the animals? I mean, the animals don't need to use a gun to hurt you. They've
No.
got teeth and claws and all the other accessories that even we can use to attack you. So, I mean, just because you ban one lifeless, inanimate object doesn't mean that you're going to be magically safe.
Well,
It's
not
mostly
only that,
important to
but
pay attention."
well, that's right. And not only that, but in Canada, we have gun laws too, but they're still there. People still have them.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The bad people do anyway. When they're not supposed to, but they do. So they're getting in somewhere, right? Even if they're not properly done, like the last shooter that you had in the schools had just bought, I believe, their gun, didn't
Just
they?
a few days before. I
Before.
think one of them here in the country that happened.
Yeah. So, what can you tell us about some of the people that you might have on? Let's take it bit by bit on maybe some self-defense situations that you might teach.
Well, the very first thing that we cover is situational awareness, because with no awareness, you have no chance. And if you don't know the basics as far as situational awareness, being aware of what's going on around you, then it's impossible to identify threats. And we always have that foundation of creating a baseline. And we call a baseline is what is normal in your environment. And you can create a baseline anywhere from your commute to work, whether you're in a car, you're on the subway, whether you're at the grocery store, restaurant, in your home, anywhere around you, you can establish that baseline, which is what the normal environment is. And then once you've established that baseline, and the more you spend time in those certain areas, you'll be able to go in more depth as far as what's normal. After you've established that, then you can pay attention to the anomalies or those that are breaking the social rules. Everything from, we've got overt signs of threats, which is in your face, having some guy running down the street with a machete in the air or shooting a gun or screaming that he's going to kill you. And then we've got the covert sign of threats, which is the body tells, whether the pupils are dilating or expanding, or the flush in the face or sweating. There's so many different signs of when somebody's under stress when they shouldn't be. If you start breathing heavy and you haven't been exercising, that's a sign of a possible threat. Or if you got a guy that walks into the restaurant and he's wearing the big heavy overcoat and it's 90 degrees outside, that's a sign that there's something wrong. You need to pay attention.
Right. But you actually have to be using your ears and your eyes for that.
Yeah, you have to pay attention to what's going on around you. And then on top of that, you need to work through plans. The perfect example of, your title of your podcast, that your backup plan, if your body will never go where your mind has not already been. So
I love that.
Time that you don't have a plan, your brain is more likely to freeze and you will shut down instead of be able to deal. Back in 2008, there was a young man that went into a college over in Illinois, and entered into a lecture hall and started shooting. Shortly after he started shooting, the professor and many of the students ran out of the lecture hall, but there was still a core group that was still there, and they froze. He reloaded his handgun, and there was a scream in the back that said he's reloading, and there was another group of students that escaped. Well, there was still a group after that that were still there and frozen, and he lined them up on the ground, and they were videoing with their phones, and they were just sitting there watching, and he lined up with a 12 gauge shotgun and went along and killed each one of these students until he got to the last round, and then he turned the shotgun on himself and killed himself. Well, they asked the students, why didn't you run away? What were you thinking? And
Yeah.
the number one answer or response that they gave is totally shocking. And you think about it after the fact and you go, this is absurd. The number one response was they thought it was a test. I don't know about you, but I don't know what math class or English or even geometry that entail having a test where somebody comes in and assassinates my classmates. But when we think about it, you think about it now in calm state, and you're like, well, that's absurd. How many times do you hear in a mall shooting that people say, I thought it was fireworks? Well, who's going to light fireworks in a JCPenney or in a mall? I mean, that's just not going to happen. So we teach that you need to go through those plans, and any situation is good. Even if you're including plans of aliens and zombies, you're still going to be able to work through that plan, and it teaches your brain, oh, I've already thought about this. But one key point that we always include is that you should always have that plan to a positive outcome. There's several different benefits that helps. That not only when you're teaching children, which you want to be able to teach your children to be safe, and you want them to be confident, and you want them to be able to think through and not be frozen and overwhelmed by concern. And that positive outcome teaches them that they can do hard things, that it can work out, and that it'll be okay as long as you have that plan and you work through and you can be able to not freeze and operate.
Mm-hmm. You see that all the time, though, don't you? Where actually the kids are probably doing better things than adults do in this case of a school shooting or something.
They are now, because unfortunately they're having to do active shooter drills. Just like when we were growing up, we always did fire drills a couple of times a year. It's along the same line, is they get it in those kids' head of this is what you do. So if something does happen, the teacher isn't having to worry about 25, 30 kids in their class freaking out. They just respond and know what to do.
Right.
I mean, it just like back in the 40s and 50s when they had the bomb drills. It's the same idea. It's just getting those in their brains and running through them with them so that they just know what to do.
Right.
It also helps on disseminating the information out to your employees. We work with companies to help them with their security and their safety protocols and procedures. And if they don't actually do drills, they don't actually go through those. Number one, the employees don't know what to do. They're not going to even remember or know because they've never been told. Number two, it's not going to be ingrained in their brain, and it's not going to be through that action, because action is always faster than reaction. And when you can work through and plan ahead and work through and actually have dry runs, then you're going to be able to have that memory a lot easier. So if something does happen, you're going to just default to those trainings that you've already received. And if you don't have a plan for emergencies until that emergency happens, it's too late.
That's right. I use that example with you guys backstage. Was working in a high-rise building, and there was an earthquake, and everybody just looked at themselves. looked at each other, and some were already outside. I looked out the window, and there's a bunch of people outside on the sidewalk, and then there's people running down the stairs, and there's people in the elevator, and nobody has a plan of knowing what to do. Are we allowed to use the elevator in an earthquake, or is it better to use the stairs, or do you just duck down under a table, or like nobody knows what to do. Everybody's just frozen stiff there.
And a few searches and a few time as far as actually doing the research, for 5 minutes of research, you'd have all those answers. You'd be able to do what you need to do. And you've got to remember that you're always the only one responsible for your safety. So in a world full of expecting somebody else to bail us out or to take care of us, we've got to break that mindset and say, hey, you're responsible to be your own bodyguard. You're responsible when when minutes count, when seconds count, cops are always minutes away, or firefighters or EMTs. You should always spend some time on what your medical needs are going to be. Receive some basic first aid training can save your life and the life of your loved ones. And it's also a major factor in self-defense, because the only thing there's other things that can hurt you and kill you other than a predator with long fangs, or Bocephus with a
big teeth,
with a pocket knife or a machete. There's other things that can hurt you. Like, you've got natural disasters that no matter what you think you've got to have a plan, because there's different scenarios that can happen when your roof goes off your house. Or
that's right.
Where are you going to go? What room are you going to run into? And if you don't do that research before, it's too late when it actually happens.
Yeah, we just did a refresher course with the employees in my office, and because we had some changes, we'd had some additional offices added as part of our office. And so we were refreshing everybody what the plan was. And a couple of days before this had happened, before we did this, there was a situation in our building that we were in a meeting. All the full-times were in a meeting, and our student employees were in the office. And we heard 2 pops out in the main lobby, and somebody screamed. Now, those of us in the meeting, a couple of us immediately went to threat was in our minds. And one of the guys who hadn't been in our office very long, first thing he did was reached for the door to open it. And we're like, no, don't, And so we told him, you've got to stop and think. And it's like, yeah, we definitely, we've got to do this refresher course. And it ended up being a couple of balloons that had popped, and it had scared this girl, and she screamed. But the sound of it, because of the way our building is, it's very open in the lobby with a big skylight. It was a very echo. It was a very hollow sound. And so if you didn't know, and it did scare some of the offices. We were on the second floor, and some of the offices down on the first floor, they actually shut their door because that's first place they went. And I'm like, good for them. And our students, in our meeting, were like, well, we're just going to follow you if something happens. I'm like, guess what? I'm not always in the office. It's like, look at what happened, 2 weeks ago when this situation happened. All the full-times we were upstairs. It's like, what are you guys going to do if we're not here? And it really made them stop and think that, realize that they've got to think for themselves and come up with their own plans. And one thing that did help is I shared them. I says, if something were to happen in the building with an active shooter, this is my plan. What are you guys going to do? And it made they got some ideas from what I was thinking. And talking it with your coworkers or with your family, get your kids involved with your discussions, because sometimes they may have an idea that you don't. They see things at a different level than you do.
Yeah.
And include them in it.
And I think we're more prepared than ever for shooters in the schools. It seems to appear that way anyways. They have more things that they've done, like lock the doors and having a button to press, and that kind of thing has changed our school system than just having anybody come in and walk around and do anything. But also hurricanes and tornadoes, I think we're better prepared for that situation than ever before. At least that's what it appears to be anyways. There's less dying because they know what to do. But we're definitely not
Where
prepared.
you live too.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, one thing that I teach with some of my classes is, have you thought about a plan while you're traveling? If you're from the Midwest and you go to Disneyland, what are you going to do if there's an earthquake?
Yeah.
They don't deal with them all the time in the Midwest like California does. What's your plan? They don't think about that while they're traveling. Well, I'm at home. This is my plan, but what about away from home?
Right.
And we have white zones too. I mean, the human brain is, that denial is such a factor that we'll go and have people that will go, well, I'm perfectly safe at home. And they won't lock their door. They won't do any of the procedures, but they think magically, since they pass that threshold, no evil can pass that threshold. So they go into a white zone. When they walk in, they're comfortable and they just check out, where you've got to have that. The only time you should really be in white zone is when you're asleep.
Yeah. Yeah. Then you have an excuse. I always talk about on the show when something happens. It could be that you were just, you didn't die, but you were part of whatever it is that's happening, like those school students perhaps, or, a parent passes away in front of you type of thing, or somebody has a heart attack, or you're in a car accident, something quick and sudden. Your brain totally disappears. It's like it floats away from your head and you can't think anything logic after that. And that's why I like what you say about having a plan, because when the situation happens, are you going to be prepared with your head working to make right decisions?
And sometimes you're not going to be able to speak. You've got to be able to have that information, or be able to relay that information for either those that love you, or even, there's so many people that are single and they live by themselves and they don't have somebody. Like, I have my sweetheart that's, we spend a lot of time together and we work together and all of these factors, but she still knows my details as far as my allergies and as far as those things that I want, because we've discussed those. So we've discussed, just because you have a piece of paper that has your living will doesn't mean that it will be carried out unless you have that communication with those that are around you, those emergency plans or those emergency necessities. If you aren't communicating with your significantly other, or your coworkers, or those that are around you that you spend most of your time, if you don't plan, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail.
That's right. I used to work at a bank, and our office for insurance and financial was just off to the side of the regular banking system. And so it was, once you came into the bank, you either went straight forward to the tellers or you went to our department. So we were kind of like this pathway. Now, the banking systems have a program online where employees take a course on this sort of thing, a shooter or somebody going to rob the bank or whatever that situation might be. But I have always said to all my coworkers, is what happens, we're going to be like sitting ducks here, because we have no idea what they're going to do up at the teller. We don't see them. And they could already have 2 or 3 people come in and we would be totally sitting ducks. What is our plan? Like, and everybody just kind of looks at me like, what? I couldn't believe it. Like, am I the only one thinking of this? I've seen enough movies.
I think that we are the minority that actually considers and thinks that. One thing that our foundation of DPP defense, and it stands for Daily Practical Personal Defense, is the foundation is understanding that your brain is hardwired for self-preservation. And when you can learn how to tap into your subconscious and have your subconscious communicate with your conscious mind, then you can understand and you can identify those threats earlier than just watching for them. There's all those factors as far as videos to watch. And we talked about a lot of the tells or the indicators of the pupils and the sweating and different things like that. But have you ever wondered why a dog can tell bad people or good people? Well, we have those same senses. If you've ever noticed when you bought a new car or bought a car, shortly after, everybody around you was driving the same make, model, and color. It's not that you're so cool that everybody went out and bought that same car. It's because your subconscious learned that you wanted to identify that. And so as you work through plans and as you focus on those plans and work on them, your subconscious learns, says, hey, you want to know that. You want to see those things. And so as you work through, your subconscious works on all of your senses, the sense of smell, sight, hearing, and touch and everything. So it pulls through those in. And if somebody comes in to that teller and his heart rate's elevated, his blood pressure is elevated, because your body, when it's in that fight or flight or in that state of
shock,
possible threat, it dumps about 23 chemicals into your system. And it increases your blood flow. It increases the oxygen to your muscles. And your senses, your smell and everything, you can pick up those same things that the dog can too. But it's our subconscious that picks it up. And as you train, I mean, how many times have you ever had the hair on the back of your neck stand up, or goosebumps, or butterflies in the stomach? All of those are your subconscious communicating with your conscious mind going, hey, there's a possible threat. There's a person over across the way that his blood pressure is elevated. His voice is tensed. He's got all these things, but your subconscious can't communicate it except through having that reaction. And as you can read your gut or trust your gut, then you can be able to identify those. And it's the same way with natural disasters to animal threats to human threats. Your body, whether it's an actual biological threat or whether it's the barometer changing rapidly and you have a storm come in, if you've ever been hiking in the mountains and a rainstorm starts blowing in and your body's picking up in the temperature change and the air change, it's your subconscious telling you, hey, your body's in danger. You better start paying attention. So ultimately, we're limited mortal beings. And so we're not going to be perfect in identifying all threats around us. But as we trust our gut and learn how to listen to our gut, then we're going to be able to identify those threats a lot quicker. And there's every person out there that I've ever talked to, if they had a chance to know 1 minute before a bad thing was going to happen, they would want to know, or half an hour before you'd want to know. Well, being able to work on that situational awareness, being able to trust your self-awareness, then that gives you that extra minute. That gives you that extra time to be able to identify that threat and take a deep breath and then realize what's going on. And when you take that deep breath in, you're getting more oxygen into your body, into your brain, and you can work on those plans that you've established, and you can be able to respond and turn it in your favor instead of having you get blindsided.
Yes, absolutely. But there's rules, of course. People have to put their phones down. People need to be aware and be present in the moment to realize what's happening around them and not be like this in their phone with earbuds or earphones in and not paying any attention.
Well, you are always more susceptible to an attack when you're in a state of transition. And we teach in our classes everything from physical, mental, and spiritual transition, you are vulnerable to manipulation, to sexual abuse, to attack. And anytime you're in a state of transition, whether it's walking from that store to your car, or whether you're changing a lifestyle or a life
Yeah.
experience, whether you're getting married or you're newly pregnant or you're going through any of those changes, that's a transition. And whenever you're going through a transition is when you need to pay attention. So if you're basically, when you're asleep and stable in one location, if you're sit down and you're stable and the door's locked and everything, you're good to check your phone. Or if you're in the store before you start moving, that's when you should be checking your phone, taking care of your phone calls. But when you're transitioning, you should pay attention, whether you're hiking or whether you're walking or whether you're dealing with theology.
I think too, if going to a mall or something, right?
Yeah.
Because there's so much activity.
To the store, or in between on a campus, in between classes. I mean, we've heard people say, that have been attacked is, I felt something was off. Something wasn't right, but they don't trust their gut.
We had a young lady that we were talking with on a way back from a show that she was working on taking a class from us, and she was assaulted in broad daylight. And as we were talking through the situation and working through what she could have done, or what the foundation, and to make sure that she was okay, that she wasn't going to be, that she was going to be able to continue on and work through the trauma that she suffered. But as she was going through and we were talking about the different factors of being aware of your surroundings, she says, when I was walking to my car, I was messing with my purse. I was reaching into my purse to get keys and things. And that's when he got me. And it's always, when they're a predator, especially the scavenger level predators, are going to always watch for the easy target. They're always going to watch for those places that they can blindside you or sneak attack you. Ted Bundy, those of you that are familiar with the famous serial killer Ted Bundy, he said that he could identify his victims by the tilt of their head and by their walk. And the simple thing of being able to recognize that they were more submissive by looking down or not paying attention, and by the way they were unsteady in their walk or in their gait, he was able to identify that they'd be an easy victim for him because they weren't paying attention and they weren't capable to defend themselves because they had put themselves in that situation.
I was always told, maybe you guys can tell me whether it's right or wrong, and the listeners, but when you're going to your car, let's say you're leaving work or you're leaving the mall and you're going out the doors to your vehicle in the parking lot somewhere, movie theater, it doesn't matter what, but you should always have your keys ready before you go out, and then stick them in your fingers like this in case you ever need to poke them in the eye.
That depends on the key. Now, we firmly believe that you should try out your method of defense before you have to defend yourself. So those smaller sharp keys or those smaller hard keys, if you've ever punched anything with something between your fingers, you should do it. And it's very painful and you'll never want to do it again. Yeah. We actually teach open hand because when you respond to a threat, which, referring back to your brain being hardwired for self-preservation, your body responds to threat and stimulus in a certain way. And it's that flinch. When you flinch, your hands go up and protect the vitals, the head and the heart and lungs. When you're in that position, you can do a strike and be able to hit with the palm of the hand and not damage the bones in the fingers. But there are so many tools out there that you can utilize. Now, if you've got there's a lot of keychain defensive tools out there that will fit in your hand properly and that will give you an extra striking capability. But yeah, first off, you should get your keys in your hand. You should get rid of all the things that would distract you. Put your phone away in your pocket or put your phone away in your purse. But you want to keep that key out there so that you're not fumbling with it when you get to the vehicle. Number two, when you get to your vehicle, you need to get off the X. Now, when you're dealing with an ambush, that's where they're going to ambush you, is where they know you're going to be. Now, they know you're going to be to that point because they've most likely watched you get out of your car and go in. They may not know when, but they know there.
Approximately, I'm sure.
So
They've been watching.
Car and you get out of there, even if you drive 100 yards down the road or down the parking lot, you've moved where their planned attack is. So don't sit in your car and mess with your keys or mess with your kids or papers or whatever. Get your stuff in your car, pay attention while you're doing it, and then get out of there. And then if you need to stop 100 yards down the way and straighten something up or deal with that, fine, do it then.
Yeah.
But even if you have your window rolled up, somebody can go and smash and grab really quickly, and you're still stuck in that spot. So once you get out there and you get engaged, you're going to be a whole lot safer because you're off that X. You're off that target space.
Isn't that the first place that they try and get you, is when, as soon as you get into your car, when they basically ambush you or take over your vehicle? And some people get to stay in them, and sometimes they, knife them or whatever, and then run away with your car. I'm just trying to think.
Well,
of
you have to watch
scenarios.
any of those transition areas. You should watch. So whether you're going through that parking lot, they could hide behind a car. So you need to give space to any blind spot. So when you're walking through a hallway and you're coming around a corner, don't go up tight to the corner. Back off, and space is your friend. When you're walking through the cars and stuff, give it a little space. Give it 3 or 4 feet so that you can actually see if somebody's tucked down there. When you get to your vehicle, what do you typically do? Do you typically open the door and lean down in with your back to the public and put your stuff away? Pay attention. Do a quick sweep. Pay attention to you should do a rapid search anytime that you need to pay attention to something else, like in your vehicle. You should do a 525 look, which when you pan around around you, 365, you want to look from 5 feet out to 25 feet. That way you're seeing what's up close and what possible threats are out there. If you're looking out at 25 feet and some dude's hanging out and just breaking those social rules and just kind of milling around in the parking lot, don't turn around and mess with putting your stuff. Toss it, close the door, hop in, and get out of there. Or get back to the store that you're at and notify security or notify somebody that can watch your back, and then you can go out and have them cover you while you're getting in your vehicle and go out. Because typically that one predator that's milling around, he's going to look for a crime of opportunity, because all predators don't want to be hurt, killed, or caged. And that is whether it's, Bubba, the thief or rapist, or it's, Fido, the ankle biter dog, or even a mountain lion. They don't want to have that risk. And so when you increase the people that are around you or stand up, pay attention, that increases their threat. That increases their chances of getting hurt. And they don't want that. They don't want to get caught. They want to break the rules. They want to break the laws, but they don't want to have the consequences.
Don't you think, though, most of all the school shooters have killed themselves?
No.
No?
No, there's a vast difference between different groups and I noticed about 10 years ago that there actually 3 different types of predators in the mindset. And all too often in the military and law enforcement, they view all predators to overcome and destroy, where we focus on identifying the different types, which there's the scavenger or low level predator, which is a lot more skittish and a lot more watching around. Then you've got your alpha apex or high level predator, which is a lot more sure. If you're thinking of the wild grizzly bear or a lion, they're a lot more calm. They know their skills, they know their abilities of death and mayhem. And then you've got your sick or disassociated. And your sick or disassociated are most dangerous because they don't worry about being hurt, killed, or caged. And those are typically with mental illness, narcotics or drugs, alcohol, or just like your mama bears.
Yeah.
They don't care because about their own self-being because they're protecting something else. Now you've got your group shooters, you've got varies of different ones that are out there. Typically your mass shooters are not going to be your scavenger level predator. Typically your scavenger level predator is going to do more bombs than that they can do remote, and they can hide in the side. Your active shooter is going to be either your alpha apex or your sick or disassociated. Now the sick or disassociated, very likely they're going to end up either killing themselves or wanting to die by law enforcement. But your alpha apex, they've got an exit plan. They're ready to cause damage, and you'll see on a lot of those that they'll go to a workplace violence and they'll kill a bunch of people, and they've already killed somebody else at home, and they'll typically have a list, and they'll plan to get away, get out of there after they've caused their death and move to another point. So you can't ever assume that they're going to stay put and die, because there are a lot of them that they want to live and they want to get out of there and they want to cause more damage and they want to get away with the consequences. So
It's
as you
like,
pay attention to those, whether they're showing the tells of a sick or disassociated, which is that lost gaze, that 100-yard or 1,000-yard stare, that they're looking through you. They're not really, their eyes aren't responsive. They're got accumulation in the eyes. Their hair is disheveled, or they're missing patches of hair. And this is the same with animals and humans. They're walking in an irregular gait. They have a hard time standing. They're irrational in screaming at things that aren't there, or their slurred speech, or they're not behaving in a normal fashion. Those are those that are going to be the sick or disassociated, and they're more dangerous because they don't really care.
Is that where Silence of the Lambs falls into?
Actually, Silence of the Lambs, Hannibal Lecter in the movie is an alpha apex level predator. He knows what he's doing. He's crystal clear. Now, the guy that he's based on was a sick or disassociated. The guy that he's based on was in Europe, and he was abused really horribly as in his youth, and he wound up killing a man. They put him in prison, and he wound up killing another man because the man was a child abuser, and he had a flashback, and then he just went berserk from that. And after that, then they basically have put him in solitary, and he's got the record, I think, as far as the most solitary days, because he was so dangerous, because he would eat part of his victims too. But he is a sick or disassociated predator because he doesn't care. So it's funny how when you look at Hollywood and you look at real life, number one thing that you need to remember when you're watching on any movie or Hollywood is 99% of the time they're wrong. And if you learn all of your skills or all of your emergency preparation or self-defense off Hollywood, you're dead, or you're in pain, or you're really in trouble, because number one, when you shoot somebody, they don't go flying across the room. And number two, if you stab somebody, they don't drop immediately. Even the most skilled fatal strike, they're still going to function for a little bit. So
Yeah.
Hollywood is Hollywood. It's not
Yeah.
real.
Have you guys had the same problems as we've had here in the Vancouver area for stabbings on the bus? There has been so many. I can't even remember how many it's up to now.
Well,
And we're not
stabbings have always been an effective attack. There was a study that was made back in the late 80s that they discovered that more rapists use knives than guns because of the psychological factor of knives. Knives are silent, and more people are killed in a stabbing incident than in a handgun. Now, because the handguns, they don't have the velocity to be able to penetrate and cause hydrostatic shock, or basically you die from the wound track. And when you've got a bullet that goes into you and it's going in the slower speeds of a handgun, it causes a really, really small wound track. When you're dealing with a rifle, it causes a lot more of a wound track because of that hydrostatic shock when the bullet's going through its reverb. Now, a knife, when it goes in, and typically most attacks aren't slashes, they're stabs, when they go in, it's going to cause a larger wound track because it goes in, and as it comes out, it's got a sharp edge, so it's going to slice even more. And it's very covert. It's easy to be able to pull out. And if you've looked at the news as far as over in the Orient and in the UK and in a lot of those areas, as they restrict firearms, it doesn't affect the predators. It affects disarming those that are being able to use tools to defend themselves. And so they refer to sharp instruments, which the vast majority of people are killed by blunt force trauma or by other means, which a hammer can kill a person just as quick as a knife. And those two tools have been around for forever because you can grab any blunt instrument and take somebody out, or use a lot of different tools to puncture the body because we've got a lot of soft tissue. And so it's going to be common, and it always will be a common thing. And that's why you've got to pay attention to who's around you and how they're acting, because they're going to show certain tells when they're hiding their hand and then when they're putting it, because they're not going to walk up and have their hands out wide open like this and just walk up to you and be able to stab you. They've got to reach and grab it.
They're not going to tell you beforehand like that.
The hands, the eyes, and the feet.
Yeah. I'm not sure what you do on a bus because you're not always, like, the only time you could be aware of who's on the bus is when you first go in to sit down. And the people might be behind you, so I'm not really sure what happened in the buses. But like, we just lost a 17-year-old last week with being stabbed. His mom was waiting for him at the bus depot spot when he got off the bus to take him home, and she didn't know why he wasn't there because they had stopped.
And so if you watch
the bus
people's
driver had to
eyes,
stop.
if you watch people's eyes as they work through it's called a targeting glance. So if they start moving closer to the person, which in a bus, you're going to be close to people, and it's a matter of the standard protocol of there. But when they get closer, they'll start watching. And if you watch people's eyes and they start glancing down, you need to get space. You need to back off. And these are your best tools on a edged attack, because sure, you're going to get cut, but you're better to get cut on your hand and be able to manipulate and fight back than let them get up close and pop you in vital organs, because there's a lot of easy targets there when you get up close. But if you're watching people's eyes and they're glancing down, that's not a good thing. That's a tell that either they're trying to steal your pocketbook or they're trying to hurt you. and you don't want either one of those. So if they start glancing
Yeah.
down, and then you got to communicate. Unfortunately, we're programmed that
Yeah.
it's not polite to speak up and say, hey, back off, give me space. No. And we're programmed that it's not okay to poke somebody in the eyes or to bite somebody, or it's not polite, and it's a dastardly rule to, cheat on fighting. Well, if you find yourself in a fair fight, you're doing it wrong. So as we pay attention to the simple things like the eyes, and you're making contact with the eyes, not only can you do that, but I love to talk to people. So when you connect with eyes, you can communicate, and you may find some friends that you never knew existed. So there's positive and negative for all of outcomes or benefits for being able to watch people's eyes, watch the way they're standing and the way they're interacting with you, not only to keep yourself safe, but to make the world a better place.
That's right. Have you ever, I guess you have in your workshops that you give, which, by the way, everybody, they also have remote online courses that people can take, as well as in-house when you're near the area, and as well as for employers as well as individuals, correct?
Yeah,
Yes.
we travel all over the place, but you can go to dppdefense.com, and we've got our practical personal defense class online, so you can go there. We're working on the rest of the courses to make them available as well. And then we also travel around. So not only typically we're in Idaho, Utah, Montana, and Wyoming, but we are willing to travel farther if you can make it possible for us. Then we're happy to travel around and help everything from corporations to private. We've even got several families that over in Boise that they want their whole family to take the course and take some of the classes. So we're making arrangements with them to be able to have, when all the family, basically a family reunion, and teaching the class at the family reunion.
Yeah.
Because they
No,
care
that's
about their
awesome.
loved ones, and they
And
want
it goes,
them to love this.
that's right. And it goes hand in hand with me talking about family conversations, because that's the same thing as having those family conversations so that you know what the other person wants or doesn't want. Do they want to be buried? Do they want to be cremated? Have you had these talks with them? Do they want to go in a care facility? Do you want to stay at home in a basement suite or an apartment? Like, have these conversations. It's never too late to talk about these things, because you don't know when something's going to happen, just like what you said.
Yeah.
Before I ask you your last question, because I don't know where the time's gone, I've really enjoyed this, and we're going to have you guys back. There's just so much to talk about. But my thought of the whole process was, what, with all the homeless people now, everywhere, small cities, big cities, it doesn't seem to matter, what kind of protection do you need to think about, and in those cases?
Actually, there's certain factors to account for when you're dealing with personal safety, and there's certain factors not to deal with or not to worry about. The location of the attacker's original location, or where that trackers come from, doesn't matter. Whether it is being safe from a sexual predator, and I don't care if he's a pastor or if he's the good old uncle or he's the best friend or he's a homeless guy, it's by the tells that they act, their actions, and by the tells that they show you. So when you're dealing with your kids being alone with somebody or in reach of a predator, whether it's a homeless guy that's walking down the street, if he's holding a sign and saying,
Feed
I'm
me.
panhandling, that's not a sign of a threat. Now, if he starts talking to somebody that's not there, or he starts moving aggressively, or those type of things, that's when you want to pay attention to and get that space. It's the same thing when you've got your pastor or you've got that neighbor, that close friend, that he starts breaking those boundaries and barriers. He starts touching, you know,
Yeah.
Accepted touching,
Unwanted.
unwanted touching, even on the shoulder or poking in the back of the hair, or that's how they groom and that's how they move forward. When they start doing that, say no, give me space, back off, communicate, say no, this is not appropriate, this is not wanted, and this is not going to be accepted. That's how you stop those factors. That's how you keep yourself safe, is by looking at the tells, not whether they've got
They have a suit and tie on, or
whether
dirty old
whether
clothes.
they're wearing a shirt and shirt, or whether they're a certain color or a certain ethnicity or gender or whatever. It's not that. It's what they're telling you through their actions and through their moves and through their looks and your senses, as far as something's wrong here.
And I think that's why it was hard for anybody to pick up that Las Vegas shooting at that concert, where he went into the hotel across the street and shot from the window or the balcony.
Yeah.
And there was a really interesting story. One of the guys that I regularly train with was one of the original instructors for the Marine Hunter program, where they instituted situational awareness when we started going overseas in Kuwait and Afghanistan. He trained a gentleman that his daughter went to that concert, and she never went to one of his Yusuf's classes, but the father, communicating with his plans and communicating what he'd learned with his family, saved her and her friends' lives, because she utilized what she had learned as far as paying attention. She started hearing those pops, and that's not right. There's something wrong. And they started heading out. And then once she gathered her friends up and they were headed towards a safe space, that's when people started dropping. That's when the casualties started. Yeah. They had that extra minute to get ahead, or that extra moment of a head start, that kept them safe and moved them out of harm's way. It's because of that communication of loved ones that saved her and her friends' lives.
Yeah. I think we'd all like that extra minute before something happens. That's for sure. That should be a quote of some sort.
I mean, the same thing. I mean, even with weather, with natural disasters, you understand when you see the weather, what's the difference between an advisory and a warning and a watch. If you're going out of the backcountry in the winter, know your avalanche signs, what you should be, where you should go, what you shouldn't do, what you should take with you. Okay. It's showing that, okay, we're possible thunderstorms, or, I mean, down in southern Utah, we hear every spring and summer, well, the storm hit 50 miles away, but you get in those slot canyons, and that's where the water goes. Yeah. It comes down those canyons quite a ways. And unfortunately, we lose people every year because of that.
We do here too.
Learning not just what's immediately right here, but what is going on around you, whether that be within your community, within nature.
Yeah.
Stop and listen. Pay attention.
And you're always going to have those responses with your gut. You're always going to have an eerie feeling, or something is off.
Or a smell.
Instead of going, oh, that's weird, and try to explain it away, take a deep breath and get out of there. Yeah. I mean, it's better the best self-defense situation is the one you're never in. And if you can get away, it's better to be away from it and not have something happen than stay put and have something happen.
Absolutely. Even though you've said so many great things, both of you, what kind of final message would you like to give the listeners?
I think the number one thing that we teach in all of our classes, and that we want everybody to remember, and the foundation, even when we train first responders, law enforcement, and even those that can take care of themselves, the one thing we want you to remember is you are worth fighting for. You are worth defending. And if anybody ever tells you otherwise or tries to convince you otherwise, they're wrong. So you've got to remember that I am worth fighting for. You are worth fighting for.
And that
Kind of like a movie.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter what the situation is with some of the stuff that you're dealing with setting up the wills. You're fighting for yourself. You're fighting for your family, setting up disaster plans, communicating, okay, if this happens, this is what we're going to do. Or why would you do this? Explaining those things. It all fits under that you are worth defending. You are worth fighting for.
Oh, that's beautiful. And it brings me to that Thailand tsunami. I mean, people going on holidays thinking everything's all hunky-dory, and then they have this tsunami where people don't understand, well, why is that big wave coming at us? Like they wait too long.
Yeah. If you're going into a country
we
like
lost
that,
families.
Know what the signs are.
Yeah. We lost whole families, like complete families on that beach.
Yeah.
Crazy when you think about it.
And all it takes is a few seconds to do some Google searches and look at what possible threats or possible things that can happen. And then remember that your body will never go where your brain has not been. Yeah,
it's true. Because now I know what a red flag means on the beach. I didn't know that before. Until nobody told me, and I was like, why is there a green flag, a yellow flag, or a red flag? That's a big point right there. Make sure you know what the flag looks like before you jump in the water. Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you guys for coming on. I can't believe it. It's already been an hour, and everybody, all the information is down below in the description box for Robert and Katrina. And I'm sure we're going to have these guys on again because there's so much more to talk about. We can't tell you enough about what happens to your head when you're in shock and when something occurs from a car accident or a shock of a death or anything, actually, an avalanche or a fire. Your brain totally disappears. But if you can, like Robert says, find that part of your brain that knows it already because you've already done it, it's like it comes to you quickly. And it's a time where you need to have your brains, in those instances, definitely. So, when we look at the last 5 years around the world, shootings in the schools and the streets and work accidents and car accidents and overdoses and the pandemic, and not to mention the crazy wars and natural disasters, wildfires, hurricanes, tornadoes. We need to have a plan, and it's time to have, well, I guess your backup plan, because you need to have some sort of plan when you're going on holidays, whether you're at home, at work. And that's what Robert and Katrina are really teaching, to have a plan wherever you are. Doesn't matter if you're on holidays, if you're at a wedding on the beach, make sure you know all those things. Have your eyes and your brain working so that you can not attract the opposite, but be more aware of what's around you. Make sure you have your earbuds out. Make sure you're not walking with your head down inside your phone. Your phone can wait, right? I think that's what we all have to say, and it can wait for a few minutes. But that being said, if you're thinking of that special someone right now while you're watching the show, make sure you reach out to them if you haven't told them how much you love and care about them today. Pick up the phone, Zoom them, FaceTime them, knock on their door, and tell them how much you love and care about them today, because you don't know what tomorrow might bring. And we have Carol Burnett, and I know you guys obviously know who Carol Burnett is. We always end with Carol Burnett. I'm so glad we had this time together just to have a laugh or sing a song. Seems we just get started, and before you know it, comes the time we have to say So long. So long, everybody. Be kind, stay safe. You know, Mike Tyson says everyone has a plan till you get punched in the mouth. It's very true. So have a plan and know what it is so that you're better prepared. Tell next week. Bye, Robert and Katrina. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
You're very, very, very welcome. I'm sure we'll have them come back. We'll have some more tips and tricks from them. And stay safe, be kind, everybody. Till next week. Lots of love.